Hi, it's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Joining me today, Trudy Pelletier. She's back. We've had a session before, and here Trudy is back with us. And I want to just maybe begin by telling you a little bit about Trudy. If you haven't seen her before on our podcast, she is a licensed facilitator and trainer. She specializes in facilitating difficult conversations. She's an author. She's written a book called Take a Walk on the Inside. You should check it out. And you should check out her website, which is on the screen. Trudy is a certified executive coach. She's a family enterprise advisor, and she has probably a half a dozen other designations that make her a professional in the area of facilitation and difficult conversations. Trudy, hi, how are you today?
I am great and thrilled to be with you, Henry. And as I listen to you talk about me and your presence and your being, it's like you you have this consistent capacity to elevate people around you. Thank you for that fabulous introduction.
Thank you. That sounds great. I'm flattered too. So, Trudy, we coming to the point of our discussion today, we've been wrestling with some complex issues. The last time we talked, you and I had it was a short interview, but we did some good work on some difficult topics. And today, I know we're both observing the world around us. There's heavy polarization, isn't there? I mean, inside of our businesses, our families, our communities, our friendships, there's such polarization. We know what we're talking about. There's a lot of trouble out there in the world. Now, our audience at the Catholic CEO would experience this in the same way as everybody else is. Inside of Catholic families, there's businesses, there are family issues, there are community and friendships where the polarization that we're talking about is taking place. And so I think we're all looking for tools, and we want ways to solve this polarization. And so I think the audience today would be interested in what you're seeing out there in the terms of your professional practice, and what kind of solutions, what are the tools that you're finding out there? But maybe we could start with, what are you seeing out there? What are people saying? Is this right about this polarization we both sense?
Absolutely. I can't remember, it was at least 2 months ago or so that we spoke. And for sure, I would say that there's greater distance between people as a result of the polarization. There's more right and wrong, kinds of positions being taken.
Yes.
And polarization is not new to human being. And it's overt for some of the significant issues and challenges that is being raised and that is being confronted. As an example, human beings do not like to be told what to do.
Yes.
So there's reaction that creates some of the polarization simply from, you're not going to tell me what to do. There may not even be some good thinking about what it is, that you're telling me to do. It's that there's no way you're going to tell me what to do. Do you see that? Would you say that that's inherent for people?
I think it's a tendency for all of us, and I'm particularly cognizant of the Catholic audience who does realize that we do have to accept authority, but we're talking about spiritual authority from God. But even within our political leaders and our business leaders, they have authority that's been given to them by God as well. Leaders have rightful authority. And so I know that people, at least in the audience that I'm part of here, I think they understand that, but still we're fighting back against it. And and I've never seen it this tough. I've never seen people this harsh about fighting back on this authority thing that you speak of. So either it's worsened, or we've touched a nerve in people that is kind of, dangerous in a certain way, because we might be fighting back irrationally. Or are we? I don't know. I'm asking you, I guess.
Well, what I know based on the brain science studies that I've done and that is in my work, and I did mention this last time, when human beings are threatened or have the experience or perception of being threatened, there's instinct kicks in. And the sole intention, purpose of our brain is survival, which means I'm going to outlast you.
Mhm.
So if you think about, more people than ever before are operating on instinct because of the level of anxiety, which again, we talked about last time, because the level of polarization does create a threat for people on many levels. You know, when a family has differences of convictions about some of the health mandates or travel mandates,
Mhm.
it it does trigger instinct. There's a threat of not being belonging. There's the threat of not being listened to, not being respected. All of those play out, triggering the brain instinct, the survival instinct. And rarely is there good thinking behind that. In fact, neuroscientists say that there is no good thinking behind it. We're limited to 3 strategies. So that's, one of the things that is happening, and how people experience that then is being isolated, being dismissed, being disrespected, being discounted, people being dismissed from their jobs, people being disrespected in their families. And even in, personal situations where there's an intimate relationship and we've got 2 people with different convictions and wants and maybe even needs. And rarely are the conversations productive when we're in our instinct.
Mhm. This is ringing true. You and I spoke off camera before this interview. We talked a little bit about how, in the Catholic faith, we seek the truth about something. And I think people have set that aside. So I'll just make my little plug for the fact that I think people have set that aside, and they're now into learning, and should learn, how do we solve this? Is this something we resolve? Do we come to compromise on this? Do we, when there's this kind of polarization, what's the objective here? I mean, I could assert to you that it's the seeking of the truth, but we're so far down, I think, the path where we don't even know how to dialogue intelligently with people, and with charity and with compassion. Never mind seeking the truth. We don't even know how to seek the truth or the resolution or the answer to it. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the first question you would get is, whose truth? So of the people of the Catholic faith, they actually know and understand, and there's agreement about whose truth you are seeking. When you look at the diversity on the planet, it, whose truth really does become subjective. And so one is to recognize that disagreement does not equal rejection.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I'm a trained facilitator, and I know that you highly value Susan Scott. And she's the author and work of Fierce Conversations. And, when I'm facilitating a group of people, one of the places I stand in is, this is true, and this is true, and this is true, and this is true. And so if we looked at all the multiple perspectives about the different challenges and issues that we're dealing with as a society, that then, chunks down to maybe our communities, and then to our families, and in our communities is our business world, and then our families, we're really talking about being someone who can have sovereignty over their own convictions without having to make someone wrong, which is an underdeveloped muscle in communication I see ongoingly. And because when we're making someone wrong, we're in reaction. We're not in communication that can create any kind of resolution, or that can have love and affinity be present, or have any kind of understanding be the result of that communication. So some of the tools, first and foremost, and it starts with awareness, like recognizing where you've got anxiety or are experiencing anxiety in a conversation or in the moment or in a discussion, and being responsible for that in a way that forwards communication versus react. So we did talk about last time, right? Listening to respond versus listening to understand. So unless I'm willing to acknowledge and pay attention to whether or not I have anxiety, we actually don't have a chance to implement any of the tools that I may share today.
Well, so this is interesting. Does it mean then that, like as I respond to this whole conversation, we want unity and harmony in our families, right? We want in our businesses to have some kind of unity of purpose. We want to focus on a single end. And whether we're Catholic business owners or not, we still want unity and harmony. But we're so far from it that it seems what you're telling me today is that we need to start to learn with the most basic tools. Like, how do you actually, I don't know, hear somebody and understand whether they have anxiety before we jump to the most fundamental issue? Because right now, the polarizing issues in our society, we're well aware of them. They tend to be the first thing people talk about. Are you saying that we need to be way back in the process, learn how to be better? And this is not a leading question for you. I'm curious if we just have to learn how to communicate in the first place and respect and hear different viewpoints before we can even get to unity and harmony.
Well, and I would even back up from that. It's like, what is your belief or philosophy around your responsibility for your life? So, I stand in, I am the creator of my life in partnership with a higher power. I don't know whether or not that is true for the Catholic faith, and then for someone who practiced Buddhism. But if you don't, and most people live like they're not responsible for their life. Most people live like something is happening to them, or someone is coming at them. And so even to answer that question is, people who stand in being responsible would naturally be paying attention to some of their own reactions and internal dialogue to being asked certain questions.
Does that mean that we have, what strikes me about what you just said, emotion blocks rationality, doesn't it? A lot of times. Is that what you're saying? That, we're being emotional about these things when we should be rational?
Well, we're actually, I believe it was Daniel Kahneman who won the Nobel Peace Prize, who actually proved we first make decisions emotionally before rationale kicks in. Now, even when we don't know that emotion is driving a decision, it's there. We just don't have the awareness of it. So, those people who would say, no, I'm very, very logical and rational. Yes. And human being is wired that emotion plays first, plays first out. So it might be an opportunity to increase self-awareness, right? Which then gives you access to having these difficult conversations, these conversations where there are polarizing subjects, in a way that you're being with people, being in the communication and with the communication versus, again, reacting to it.
You've talked about, at the beginning today, you talked about anxiety, and the word that comes to my mind is fear. And I know that even in this era that we're in, looking back to, let's say, the last 18 months to 2 years, tremendous levels of fear that perhaps have never been, experienced before in decades or even perhaps centuries. I don't know, but this fear thing. And so are you suggesting that we should acknowledge our fear and our anxiety first, and then on a basic human level have that as our common approach? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing from this point. Is that where we're at on this?
Well, there is lots of fear. And, there's a body of work out there that proves that emotions are contagious.
Yes, that's right. Yes. The
Okay.
fear, yes. Mhm.
So again, there's no thinking when I'm caught up in a momentum of fear. There's no thinking for self. There's no sovereignty over here with me when I let those emotions
Mhm.
get caught up. Yesterday I was visiting my mom at a long-term care facility. And one of the things that she does, being, having dementia and her mobility reduced, is she watches the news. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm very grateful for her poor hearing.
Mhm.
And yesterday she didn't turn the volume down when I was there. So what I've taken on is just, not just, is such a diminishing word, is taking on being with her, not with no need for conversation because she struggles to communicate,
Mhm.
and listen to the news. Now, full disclosure, I listen to the news once a day. It's a radio broadcast to endeavor to keep apprised of what's happening on the planet. There was nothing yesterday that was not fear-based speaking inside of the reporting on, you know, um, the pandemic, flying, travel mandates, political positions.
Mhm.
There was nothing. So, we could actually be asking the question, who's responsible for what is being created in that kind of speaking that is being publicized 24 hours a day? And I'm not making it wrong. It's like inside of this question of, if we're standing and being responsible for who we are and how we contribute to the planet, and the way in which we contribute to the planet really is in our speaking, through language. What if there was a new level of responsibility? Not that any paradigm or view needs to change.
Yeah. Yeah. This the voices that are out there creating fear. I mean, that's usually the beginning point of the conversation. And the sense that I have listening to business owners and my clients and my friends and my extended family and so on, they all want to go past that and understand more and better ways to respond to that. Like, how do I, in this climate of fear, pervasive 100% fear, like you said in that news broadcast, nothing was said that wasn't fear based. How do I respond to that? If I'm a one single individual in a planet of billions of people and I'm not in control of that messaging, what do I do to respond to it? Is that the beginning point? See, I'm really fascinated by, what do we do to begin to cope with this all, aside from the solutions and the political and medical and the economic solutions that have to be arrived at? What do we do as individuals sitting there being tormented by this?
Well, that's a victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, first and foremost, we have a say over how things impact us or don't, what we take on, what we buy into.
Sure.
And, it comes down to this personal sovereignty. I was in what they called a 9-episode conversation called The Huddle that just completed about 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they talked about was personal sovereignty, that more important than ever today, because of the momentum of some of the emotions and mainly fear on the planet. We need our own sovereignty to navigate our own, what's true and authentic for us. And there's different elements of that play out for you and your audience. That's faith-based, that absolutely, and maybe even is the leading one. As I said in our first interview, for me, it's my personal values.
Yes.
So that's part of it. And then the other thing that they talked about is we actually, what's required of us, and some of the conversation is, it's a time between two worlds. The new world is not created and the old world no longer exists. And human beings by nature are not comfortable, not relaxed and at ease inside of ambiguity.
Yeah.
And there's so many controversial positions about everything. Right? Including what kind of business, or what businesses should or should not be doing, or how to navigate this. So it really does come down to a function of communication. And rather than standing against something, what if we chose to stand for something?
Mhm. This is, in the Catholic world, the concept of ecumenism, where we try to, portray to others in the world the merits of the faith. Um, we try to seek common ground. Sometimes it's said that people try to seek common ground. So are you suggesting that we should be looking for common ground in things? In terms of, let's say there's controversy, there's fear, there's all of this. Can we start to build by common ground? Is that the answer, or the first step? Let's say.
Well, I think the first step always comes down to personal awareness, responsibility, and in accountability. Like, what am I actually putting out in the planet?
Mhm. Mhm.
So there's that. And then the other piece is, what if we started with the common ground that you and I are human? Because I can tell you that some of the clients that I am working with
Mhm. Mhm.
have experienced being dehumanized. There is no relatedness. You're so different from me because of XYZ. And what if we actually took on that you and I are far more alike as human beings? Because again, our beliefs and convictions that differ does not equate rejection. Yet the way we speak about it produces right, wrong, good, bad. I like this, I don't. And then that causes a defensiveness that is an enemy of communication.
Yeah, this is interesting, because maybe what's necessary then, if I'm paraphrasing what you have just said, maybe what we need to find is who, let me ask it this way: who are the voices that are going to go beyond the current fear-based approach, or the hectoring kind of lecturing approach that says you must do this, I'm in charge and I think you should do this? And many people don't believe that, or they don't want to live under that. And so maybe the situation becomes, then we need voices to say, wait a minute, we can find common ground, or we can find elements of unity in this problem out there. And we don't have to just be fear-based. We can take personal responsibility for, I don't know, I'm researching this in my own mind as we speak. Maybe we need to do our own analysis and find out the truth of, or the facts, let's call it the facts of a particular situation. So maybe that, but who are these voices, Trudy? That's what's on my mind right now, is we don't hear those voices. The hierarchies of various organizations, it's even been said, never mind political and business hierarchies, but even in organized religion, even in the Catholic Church, the hierarchies are not giving us this hope. In fact, they're joining in, some people would assert, they're joining in with this messaging that's out there by other leaders, politicians and health experts and so on. And so where does the ordinary citizen then find this voice? Or do we all just do it ourselves, and suddenly a groundswell rises up, and we suddenly overcome fear by the fact that we've all strengthened ourselves individually? I guess I'm getting a little philosophical here, but I'm wondering if there's something there.
Well, it's interesting. You're reminding me of a conversation I had 2 days ago, where one of my friends was telling me that she was in a workshop, and the leader said to the group,
Mhm.
and I always leave a public bathroom in better condition than when I walked in.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was like, what's that about?
Mhm.
And the point was that most of us live like it's someone else's responsibility, someone else's job to do it, because I'm sure someone is paid to clean it, right? It's someone else's responsibility. Well, what if we took on that we are that someone else? We are the one. And we start, with ourselves, and then into our inner circle and our larger circle, and not from a place of, preaching or imposing my ideas and wants and needs, really from a place of understanding what people are dealing with in the face of the complexities, in the face of the polarization, and how then would that create an experience of, being seen and heard and understood, which is what every human being is craving for?
You know,
And then allowing for naturally for common ground to emerge, to see if there is something to be united in, to be expressed in the world about.
yeah, I heard you've just reminded me also, I heard a podcast probably about a month ago in which somebody reminded the audience, and this was a Catholic podcast about spreading the faith, evangelizing. And the podcaster said that the rule that has been in place for centuries in human relationships is you have to listen first before you talk. You have to stop with the, here I am with the truth, even if I claim that I have the truth. Here I am with the truth, and here it is. Listen to me. In fact, the approach is to hear what's on the other person's mind first and fully understand it, and repeat it back even, so that it's clear that you understand it. That allows a pause. I heard this person say, it allows a pause and a warmth to build between people. So maybe that's the thing, it's let's listen first before we speak. You've said that a moment ago. Maybe that's one of the tools. Maybe we should be listening more instead of being so quick to jump with our conclusions and our own response.
Yeah. And then another place to look, and it's not any one thing, and we're going to maybe mention 3 or 4, and it's certainly not limited to that. Who we are being in communication actually creates an experience of divisiveness, polarity, wrong, or an experience of understanding, connection, love, and affinity, regardless of what people believe or don't believe in common. And most people walk around being armed and armored, and that's a Susan Scott from Fierce Conversations saying, right? Or defensive or avoidant. Don't ask me that question. So who we are being, and it's such a subtle, element to pay attention to. And it's actually, I assert in my work, it's the only place where we have a real say, where we have any authentic control, is who I am being in the face of any circumstance or any conversation or any human being. And so when I'm being reactive and anxious and judgmental, and that is a natural way of listening, right? When we're listening to respond, we're judging, assessing. Those are natural ways of being that actually, create barriers in communication. And I keep going back to communication because the bias that I have, which is communication can resolve anything. The problem is most people stop talking.
Yeah. This is, and it's, all I can think of as we're discussing this is, in the past couple of years, watching the world situation, people are unwilling to hear each other or listen. We have forgotten the basic tools, it seems, and we're the worse for it, because combine that with the fact that somebody up there, somebody outside of us, outside of our control, has a particular narrative that's being pumped out. And whether we're on one side of that narrative or another side, I suppose it doesn't matter, because everybody has developed the same bad habits of simply pumping out an assertion. I've heard so many people, as some of these narratives start to break down, I've heard some people say, I actually heard it this morning in a short little podcast I listened to this morning. Again, a Catholic author whose work I respect greatly, and basically he said that we need to learn to listen better. We need to learn to understand the other viewpoint long before we pump out our own answer. So I guess I'm coming back to a similar point, but that may be the first of the tools that we should all adopt based on the work that you've been doing. You're seeing that this is, and these are not new tools. They're in the toolbox already. Perhaps they need sharpening, but they're there. aren't they?
Yeah. And some of our brain wiring works against that, right?
Hmm.
So that's another thing that I think is misunderstood. Like if we look a couple of years ago when the Me Too movement happened,
Hmm. Hmm.
there were some, like, thank goodness that that got exposed and revealed. And inside of reaction to what got exposed and revealed, there was a divide between specifically men and women, right? The I forget the name of the vice president at the time. It was called the Pence rule.
Yeah.
So if you're traveling with a woman that you work with, you don't stay in the same hotel with her, you don't have dinner with her, you don't this, you don't that, you don't this.
Mhm.
And for men, businessmen that I am part of a group of, I actually asked some questions,
Mhm.
and 3 of them had personally experienced going into self-preservation because they were alone with a woman
Mhm.
in a business context, worried at the prospect of being accused of doing something inappropriate. And these are men that highly respected, regarded. In my view, it was amazing to me that they had that concern. So there was a divide there that's happening, and I think that there's still some element of that divide which has been overshadowed by, some of the larger social issues that we're facing today.
Mhm. Well, that's a cancel story, isn't it? That's that's the
Yes.
story of, if you're on the wrong side of that issue, you get canceled. And look what happens to certain politicians, certain mayors of big US cities. This happens to them. But I also know that that pervasive fear, I can speak personally. I know all kinds of people who are highly sensitive to where they hold a meeting. Is the door open? Is the door closed? And so again, we've got this suspicious society, yes, but also because in we're all flawed people, and so there's going to be transgressions. There are going to be some people that will do not the right thing, and again, it's a fear. I'm not sure if it's a fear, I think, that is coming to the fore with this as well. We're afraid to do things that formerly would be considered noble or good or normal, right? We're afraid. So we've really boxed ourselves in. And again, I can only think that, if I were to say what's in the toolbox, well, it's all there. But you've said today it's about communication, it's about listening, it's about I guess another thing you've said, I think, is taking control of our own fears and insecurities, and I don't know, setting aside from that or stepping aside from that. That's what I'm hearing.
And I would say, Henry, rather than taking control, being responsible.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
a different
Yeah.
context, right? There's
Yeah.
there's a world that
Yeah.
comes with the
There's a
word
world.
taking
That's right.
control.
That's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's part of the problem, because if we assert control and we simply assert something without factual or other evidentiary support, we're going to end up with we're going to polarize, which is what's happened here.
Yeah. So you mentioned a critical element, and that is being willing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, I would say that most people don't consider, am I willing to hear an opposing viewpoint? Am I willing to have people contribute to me? Am I willing to understand? There's nothing that happens in communication without a foundational commitment to being willing to be in communication and get another person's communication. And that's on a society as a whole, as well as, individually.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That this willingness thing it's powerful. It's all I see, not all, but much of what I see is an unwillingness. It's an unwillingness. It's sort of no. I already have all my data. I already know the answer. You're the enemy. I'm not. And and it's pervasive all the way through all levels of society, right up to the leadership, to the hierarchy. And somehow we need to break the logjam. What I'm hearing you say is that there are these tools, and I've said it too, that it's in the toolbox. What do we do though, Trudy? Let's get down to an actual, I don't know, let's make up a case. I'm just flying here. There's let's say there's a business owner who wants to bring the team together, and they're faced with the polarization that currently in society is number one issue. what do they do? Do they teach what you've just said to us? I mean, they should bring you in and that'll solve it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for
But
that.
don't forget Trudy's website. It's right there on the screen. Don't forget to check it out. And by the way, I've seen Trudy's work. I should say to everybody, I've seen some of the work that Trudy has done, and I've known Trudy for many years, and so I can attest that there's a skill set here that's very valuable, and you should definitely hire Trudy to solve these issues. There's my commercial plug for you today.
Thank you, Henry.
You're welcome. But so what do we do? What does this company that I'm talking about, a small company, let's say 20 people, they're in a certain business, and they've got this polarized group that they have to they have to make some money, they have to provide income and jobs for people and security for their families, livings, all of that. What do they actually do?
Well, first and foremost, and we did talk about this a lot last time, for Catholics, some of those faith-based ethics play out. In my world, there's guiding principles and values. So if those have not been articulated, if we don't know who we are as a collective, which first begins with me knowing who I am as an individual, the opportunity to work out and resolve and create workability for everyone is minimal. The next thing is to start inviting the conversation about the various views. And, if we've got a team of 20 people working together and we have 5 people who, occur as a threat to 15 other people, then the conversation becomes, so what do you need to feel safe? This person's contribution, this person's talent is critical and necessary. So again, inside of the conversation, there can be structures and agreements created in a way that has everybody work together, that fulfills on, a person's commitment or passion or talents, without this being the barrier. The problem is that because most people are coming from right, wrong, and it's usually I'm right and you're wrong, there's no room for any other conversation. You got to get rid of them, or I'm going to walk out the door. And then there's things that are put at risk because of that, So it's inviting the conversation and then ongoingly looking at what else is missing or what else could be put in place to have people, performing optimally together despite the various beliefs around this. And then fundamentally, here's the other thing, life is just a whole series of choices. So if there's been conversations for me to feel safe in an environment, and we ongoingly are looking for what else, and I can't find my way to feel safe in that environment, then it comes down to choice, which I think, you mentioned last time. A number of people that are making choices based on their faith, based on honoring their faith.
Yeah.
And that they are not victims to anyone.
No, they're in fact they're facing consequences. Yes,
absolutely.
And I'm working with some, as you know, I'm working with people who have faced an actual consequence, and that consequence is they lost their job, and they now need to find another job or start a business or something. And I find that in working with that group of people, there is not despair. There's disappointment and kind of sadness that other human beings would do this to them, but that's been the nature of history anyway, I suppose you could say. I'm not being fatalistic, but they say that goes on, and no one promised us paradise on earth. But there's a certain resiliency and strength that I see in this kind of an individual. And so because they're principle based, their Catholic principles or their other fundamental principles are at stake, they know where their limit is. They know what line they're never going to cross. And they've done so. And these are not just single individual people at the beginning of their career necessarily. I'm talking about family people and people who have numbers of dependents, or who have families to take care of. It's really interesting what's happened. And so you've pointed out, I think rightly, that there's some people who face these consequences are not victims. They are standing up for their principles. They're going to pay a price, but they're going to also find a solution. And they trust in divine providence and things like that will assist them.
Yeah. So the impact of the choices we make never goes away, regardless of how hard that choice is or not. Yeah. And, there's choices every day. Like, we talk ourselves in and out of behaviors every day. Do I eat that piece of chocolate cake or do I go for the run? Choose.
Yeah.
So if it comes down to, again, if people can operate inside of, I will make the choices and I get to make the choices for my life and I'm going to grant that to you, it starts to actually eliminate some of the polarized, I'm against you, you're against me kind of environment. And not everybody operates that, they've got choice. Not everybody actually sees that as a way of being and operating in life.
Yeah. It reminds me of an actual incident that happened about a month ago. I was called into a company to do a plus delta. And you've probably heard me talk about the plus delta, which is it's a process of examining the relationships inside of a business and the approaches and the policies of a business. And the plus delta, the plus is the positives and the things that should be retained and kept that are working successfully. The delta, the mathematical symbol for change, is that which should be changed, doesn't work, is harmful, and so on. And so I did this plus delta process over a period of about a month. And we had several, group sessions in group meetings where we went through the process. And in the end, it's just another tool. It'll sound like I'm doing a commercial here, but the tool was mostly talking about how we each were perceiving things, but I put a little structure on top of it. I said, let's use the plus delta approach, which is, it helps people to think, what are the pluses, what are the deltas, what are the pluses and the minuses, and so on and so on. But the end result was a greater understanding of the personalities and the sort of directions from which people come. And I dare say there were some improvements. Now I still have to go back to that business in the next couple of months and check in again to see what's actually happened. Have they actually followed out through with the commitments they made? My point is, in that little story there, is they made commitments to each other. They made promises to each other, which are going to supersede and go beyond this polarization and the easy kind of, I'm right, you're wrong stuff. They actually talked about it in person, about 15 people. And it was kind of beautiful to see. And if we could get back to that, I'm not saying that that's the only answer, and you have lots of tools yourself, but it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
Well, what I'm hearing is the primary result was understanding.
Yeah.
And I assert that's actually one of the things that is missing everywhere.
Yeah.
Most of us don't understand how our brain is wired. So when we're reacting, that's like normal, because inside of not knowing, it's normal. Or, understanding in teams and the various, we've got the saying, perception is reality. And rarely do we lean in to find out, what is your perception? How are you hearing things such that you're saying and doing what you are? So that sounds like a spectacular tool. And when there's a result of understanding, yes, it is a beautiful thing. It's actually extraordinary and rare. And the hard work now is keeping that alive, building the muscle to use the communication tools to ongoingly expand that understanding. Because with most people, it's a mountain with no top.
Interesting. Well, but what you said is true. I mean, they brought in a third party, me, and I'm out of there now. I have an ongoing relationship with that business, yes, but the thing is, I'm not the leader, and I'm not the subordinate. I'm not the boss, and I'm not the supervisor or the employee. I'm an outside observer who brought in a set of tools. But still, there was value created. And, so if in the end, after our conversation today, if people could say, well, let's start to summarize, because I think we're nearing the end of our time slot that we set aside for this. What would be and the difficult part is to you now. How would you summarize it, Trudy? What do we do? What do we tell people who are living in this world today, whether they're in businesses, in families, or just in relationships with friendships and community? What do we actually say? How would you summarize it all? What's the takeaway? You get the tough part.
Yeah. Looking for that one answer.
That's right. We want the silver bullet.
This.
By the way, we want the silver bullet, please.
Yeah, let's fix this problem. Let's
right.
fix people.
That's right.
Well, so one is to stay in communication, be in communication. And then in order to be in communication, it actually requires one to be responsible for who they are being in communication. So, and
what do you mean by that? Sorry, I'll interrupt. Who
we are being in communication. So when I'm being accepting, when I'm being curious, when I'm being generous in communication, which are not our natural ways, it's actually a deliberate way of generating oneself, because our brain has us walking around being someone who knows, being defensive, being like being right, because being wrong occurs as like a threat to the brain. So we have these automatic default ways of being that are inherent in human being, and then we have the opportunity and the power to shift that at any given moment. And sometimes it is a moment by moment phenomenon. I was in a breakdown with my dad the other day. I didn't win in that moment. My reaction got the best of me. So that's where being compassionate with myself and being 100% responsible with my dad and saying, I own this. You said X and I heard Y, and I reacted because of what I heard. It's a completely different context. So the ways of being that forward unity and harmony are not in our brain wiring, because our brain is wired for survival, which is to outlast others.
Yes, interesting. Well, in the search for solutions to this kind of thing that we speak about, charity in all things is number one. I think that's how I take what you've said. We need to be present to each other, as they say. We need to listen. We need to understand the other person's viewpoint. That's an act of charity. That's a virtue. And so in the pursuit of virtue, we can then achieve some good for society and some good for our businesses, because we want stability in all these things, don't we? In business and in family and in our life in general. You began this afternoon in this session talking about how the world of tomorrow is, we don't know what that's like. The world of the past is gone, and we're in this transition period. People want stability. And so one way to bring stability, as I take it from this conversation, is to listen, to hear, to understand what people are saying, to be present to them, and in all things charity. That may be the best tool there is. You've said stay in communication. That's an important
be in communication. And then two things that I'd add to that is that willingness, Henry, that we talked about earlier. And then another one is being forgiving. And I don't mean a religious context. The definition of being forgiving is, I give up forever holding it against you that you hurt me. Or I give up forever holding it against myself that I hurt you. And then again, that kind of way of being creates a space for new communication, creates a space for healing and reconciliation and, some kind of resolution to some of the friction and conflict that we are experiencing on the planet, in our families, and even within ourselves.
Yeah. Your notion of forgiveness is actually very, it's very similar to what the Catholic Church would teach about the doctrine of forgiveness. So I like what.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very familiar language to me, or at least a familiar concept to me. It's for another. We should have another talk about forgiveness and all of that, because forgiveness goes a long ways to reconciliation, doesn't it? and forgiveness of ourselves and others. It's a whole other complex topic. But look at today, we've accomplished, I think, some important discussion points. This is let us hope that this conversation makes it better for those who are watching us today and who will watch us in the future. And all I can say is I appreciate greatly that you were with us today, Trudy. This is good stuff, and I think it's very valuable that you were here. I'm sure we'll come back again and have another conversation on some other topics. So maybe last parting shot to you. What else would you like to say to us? Thank you so much for being here. And we really appreciate that you were part of the conversation today. What else would you say? Any closing comment from you?
Yeah, thank you, Henry. It is always a pleasure to be with you in the inquiry of, how do we make the world a better place? Because I do know that we share in that commitment, and not from that there's something wrong with the world. It's just, how do people live their best lives?
Yeah.
And what I would say to the audience, if there's any part of you that's dissatisfied with the tools that were shared, then what there is to do is to get interested in what's your thinking about that, such that you're dissatisfied. Because it is in our nature to look for one answer and fix something. And, out of everything there is to deal with, especially us as human beings, nobody likes to be fixed. And there is no one right answer to any one dilemma or complexity that we're out there. So it's a combination of things. And on that note, thank you, Henry, as the Catholic CEO.
You're welcome. Thanks so much again, Trudy. Thanks everybody for being here. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. See you next time. Thanks.